Right, good evening, everybody. I can't believe we're actually ready on time. We've done it. We've pulled it off somehow. So very happy to welcome Bobby Guthrie from New Cumnock Heritage back, and he's going to talk about the research he's been doing into the place names of New Cumnock, which is our near neighbour. And just on cue, the lights are going down. So I'll hand you over to Bobby. Thank you.
Hey, thanks very much for coming out in a night like this and for the invitation, Kay. So I'm going to look at the research in the place names in New Cumnock, which forms a big part of my New Cumnock history website. So they're interactive in that sort of sense. It's not just about starting off with a name and trying and find out what it means and then find out it's much more than that. So as you can see, we're quite a big parish here. Yeah, I think we get a lot more money for our wind than that, eh? But we've got lots of neighbours as well. So we've got Dumelton, Ochiltree, Cumnock, Northernleck and Ayrshire. We've got Kirkconnell, Sanquhar and Dumfriesshire, and Dalry and Carsfern and Kirkcudbrightshire. So quite cosmopolitan as well, New Cumnock, isn't it, really? But New Cumnock and Old Cumnock have never always been neighbours. As you can see by this magically changed map, artistically drawn, we're part of the Yin parish at a time. And up there in the north, in the kind of outer scope is Cumnock Kirk. I've put dates here, dates that maybe mention the place name, when the place name was used. It's not to say it wasn't a lot earlier than that. And I'm still not sure if the 13th century Beforic's statement of 1275 holds water any longer, but we'll get to the 13th century anyway. 5 miles to the southeast is Cumnock Castle, and the barons of Cumnock were there, and the earls of Dunbar before that. And then later on, these other buildings you expect to be near a castle you'll find is Cumnock Mains and Cumnock Milne. So they're all within a couple of 100 yards of where the Afton runs into the River Nith. 1650, it was split into the parish of Old Cumnock and the parish of New Cumnock. So the Old Cumnock, because they would be served by the old kirk or the existing kirk, and the parish of New Cumnock would be served by a new kirk. And it was cried New Kirk of Cumnock in some of the earlier articles. And it wasn't until 1659 that was built. It took a wee while, a lot of things happening, because it's a very important year. 1658, Oliver Cromwell died. 1660, Charles II, the tyrant, came on the throne. So we were in between that time. And then my good old pal there, Dumfries, he didn't want to pay for 2 churches and 2 ministers. So he got it changed. So I'm for none of this. We're going back to where we were. And it kind of backfired a wee bit because the 2 ministers had been outed for their kirks anyway. We're moving into the time of the Covenanting period. But then 1692, and sometimes you hear 1691 as well, that they're using that phraseology as well. Parish of Cumnock, split into Old Cumnock and New Cumnock again. And we ended up with some name changes. So your Old Cumnock Kirk and we're New Cumnock Kirk. The Cumnock Castle, nothing remains of that apart from the Castle Hill, but it's the name of the main thoroughfare through I was going to say Toon in New Cumnock, but we're a village now. And Cumnock Mains became Castle Mains, and Cumnock Mill became just the old mill. So there was a lot about stripping away the name Cumnock within the parish of New Cumnock. And what I'm going to do, and I'll mix it up a lot of times, but any time before 1650 when the name Cumnock comes up, I'll say it's New Cumnock if it refers to a place that is now in the parish of New Cumnock, if that makes sense. Because we're awful precious about being missed out. I mean, I was about 52 when I stopped crying this Old Cumnock. So the place names in the Cumnock history website, it's trying to take a holistic approach. And it's all about trying to identify the settlements and hill names and river names as well, to be fair, if lost, if something's disappeared, or much earlier forms of the name that appear in the publication of the Ordnance Survey name books. So for the Ayrshire, they were done in 1855 to 57. They come along, and that's the names that are going to get put down there. And I'll touch on that shortly. And it's, I like the phrase I've used, carefully sifting through a range of evidence. And sifting's the word, because a lot of these things aren't searchable. I mean, I can almost see the old parish records in your Cumnock in my link, because you just flick through them all the time. So you find their names in national and local records, and very good at some of the local parish accounts as well, you know, even in Ochiltree and New Cumnock and Cumnock. But then we also use the maps, and I think everybody will agree that uses them. This is a world-class facility. The National Library of Scotland maps are absolute world-class, and free access, and it's fantastic. And the maps I'm using there most of the times is Blau's Coila Provincia, so that's Kyle Province, Roy's Lowland maps, the military survey, and then I always like to include the Armstrong's Ayrshire map. It's something, probably the first map Ayrshire had seen, and something I like dearly. And the British newspaper archives as well, maybe going back into, we're quite lucky when you go back into the 1700s in the Caledonian Mercury, you'll get records of routes and, you know, what lands that are getting sent off, and you get the feeling that these are old historical names that they've got in the land, something that's done in the charters, and even some of the obituaries you get. Then there's a close interrogation of the landscape, looking with it, see the elements there, including site visits. And unfortunately, in New Cumnock, site visits are getting more and more difficult with some of the names we're dealing with. You know, we recovered from the actual open cast working, and now we have to recover again for the regeneration of the open cast. Burns are getting changed. I mean, there's sometimes I have to, if I go up in Hollyochen Cross, I have to look across and see the legals to get my bearings, because some of the hills aren't what the hills were or anything like that. And even seeing things like gates now padlocked with barbed wire wrapped around the top of gates, it's a disgrace. And then if you can get anywhere, because it's covered in forestry as well. So they take some photos, but there's also LiDAR. This is you can see these overlaps in the maps and the National Library of Scotland. So that's using the lasers, and it begins to see kind of structures below the ground, if you like. So if there was an old farmhouse, or even something like a ree or something like that, it can detect some of these things. And then this, trying to do that, as I say, that holistic, trying to put this into a much wider context, not just the name, but land holding, places, inhabitants. And that's exactly what the ploughing of the past was all about. I mean, another absolutely tremendous resource. You're not just looking down, what's the name of the firms? You're looking at who was in it, what did they do, maybe get a wee snippet for an obituary or a marriage or something like that. And it, you know, really is. So that's trying to be holistic about what you're doing. So you'll recognise all the tax rolls that you see, the wills and testaments. I apologise because I can't remember exactly the name, but there's somebody in the group that's absolutely brilliant at deciphering anything before whatever it is, the will. Oh, it's fantastic. So then you do use of analogy, looking at similar names throughout Scotland, and I often begin with Ordnance Survey name books, because that's searchable, it's free to use. You just go in and check and see if any other name pops up in any other county or parish in Scotland. And then you draw comparisons, and you maybe get something out of that survey that helps you understand the name of the one in your Cumnock. But also you get using place name books, and I have a whole collection of them, but Watson's Celtic place names of Scotland and Sir Hubert Mack's place names of Galloway are always by the coffee table, if I had coffee. The place names of Galloway Glen's website's online now as well. That's people, part of the university group as well, that Simon Taylor, friends of Simon, are working. So that's free as well. You can get in, and they're really, you're dealing with experts and scholars, okay, which is quite good. And And then what's happened recently, the social media is beginning to bloom. So on Facebook, there's a Scottish place name Facebook page. And again, these are people that are scholars, special interest in things, and they actually tolerate people like myself, about enthusiasts, and any idea what this is, and some, so it's a very, very safe space. They'd have Fries and Galloway place names. I don't know if you've come across the guy Colin Peter, worked and stayed in Dumfries, but he's up in the Orkney now. And him, along with Michael Ansell and James Brown for the Carrick area, they're compiling a huge database now of place names down there. And not only that, what they're doing in Carrick, because of that big kind of Gaelic tradition, they're also gathering surnames. And it's interesting stuff. So if you just go to Scotland's places in the Ordnance Survey book, if you've been doing ploughing up the pass, you'll probably be familiar with that page. So you go into your OS name books, and this is the sort of thing you would see. Okay, so I've just picked the legals. I say the legals, you say the legals. It's a tricky one. You've got to watch where you are. So you get something like that, this handwritten copies here, and even the toll bars getting a mention. But if I'm just looking at the legal firm there, then you get some writing there, and it doesn't show up there, but this kind of scroll here is wee red ink entries. And they're kind of entries at times because somebody's looked into John Jimmison's Scots Dictionary and say, well, write that down as well and see what it is. But thankfully, there's transcriptions, so I've done a wee bit there as well. So they're deciding what name's going to go into the Ordnance Survey map, and that's a big decision to make, because once it's on, that's it there. So they've got various modes of spelling. They go around the place and say, right, they're interviewing folk, how do you spell it? And so Mr. Guthrie, the factor, the legals, unfortunately, is not a relative. He says it's a double L. The state map says it's a double L. And the Iron Company map says it's a double L. One of the big problems we have as well, we don't get access to state maps online or county maps online. Unless you go into Dumfries, you can get the fields of the parishes and things like that. The Iron Company map, I guess, is for the short-lived Cumnock Iron Works up at the bank. It couldn't survive the competition. You get to the single L in Dal Eagles, the Waterhead, the state map says it's Dal Eagles like that. And that's important because the lands of Dal Eagles and the lands of Waterhead actually border each other. And then Mr. Johnson, this is one of the guys, like when you get, well, we'll maybe ask a doctor or a minister or a teacher. And here we have a teacher sitting in the fence doing, oh, it's Dal Eagles or Dal Eagles. Right, so he's no, and then you've got the valuation rolls. So there you have the year they started the Ordnance Survey map, 1855, and then the valuation roll, they've got two different spellings, double L and L. And what we get is a wee bit narrative, and you don't get that in them all, to be fair. This is just an example. A farmhouse and office is occupied by James Drennan, the property of Miss Christina Guthrie and others. The cottages about the farmhouse are generally called by the same name. And they also give you, and what it means is the Valley of the Eagles. That's, I mean, it'd make a great film, right? So Dal and Eagles. Christina Guthrie, she inherited the properties, the Legals, and she later bought the Perwhirter lands. She was the daughter of Alexander Guthrie and Mounty Kilmarnock. She later became Lady Oranmore, and it was her that built the legal school. Well, Furnity paid for it. Then this is the red writing down here. This was the one. The DA double with the double L. It's a large cake made of sawdust mixed with the dung of cows. Now, thankfully, it's not a cake to eat. It's a cake to throw back at the fire and burn as fuel, right? And then it also means a slovin. So I don't think the choice between Valley of the Eagles is a big cake valley. But what we know, we're much more further on now, and that Eagles part is actually more like ecclesiastic, right? It's eccles. So it's the land of the church, and the debate is whether there ever a church there, or it was just lands that belonged to the church and they raked in the money. So just going to the National Library of Scotland, the map images, and this is the Blue Coila Provincia. And these are the Dutch cartographers, and they didn't like a C as a first letter. They turned them all into K's, right? So that's why you've got Cumnock Castle there at the, what is that, Press? Right, so that's why that K's there. And the K is not there because it's a C, that's because it really is a K, right? And you begin to see all these, I mean, look at that lovely Pigwarter. I mean, names that are written like how you sound them. And it's a fantastic map. You can spend hours and then you see things like McAlliston. No sign of anything like that just now in that part of the world. But we did save a wee bit, although we haven't got any, nothing survives of the Point manuscript. The Kyle province is gone, it's all gone, that's all we've got is the Dutch version. But there's a part in this Dale and part of TV Dale that overlap, so that's the Nith going up there. That's the Afton there. And there's a wee thing in there. And that wee thing in there's Cumnock Castle. And that's this, so that's where Point C. And that probably at that time in the 1580s, we were already talking that it was in ruins. So that might just be the what's left a bit of a tower at right between the Afton and the Nith. Name of the Royal Military Survey of Scotland. And you'll see other names there like Netherbogue and Meikle Creek and that we can. But what they've done recently as well, they asked people throughout the country to say, right, could you have a look at your section of the map and give us what today's name is? And we fed all that into the National Library of Scotland. And now they've got all the names, so you can now search under the name you can, and it'll point you towards the place in the map. And there's a new map here, 1775. And very clean, some names that don't make sense, but some names like Caldside next to Rigfoot, and we can't that there was a Caldside next to Rigfoot, but we'd never come across it if you like. And of course, it's got the famous transcript about the trout that came in swimming in for air and through the loch and back down to the Solway Firth because the water run both way for Loch of the Lows. Right, so I'm going to take you back 50 years, right? So this began my passion with local history, and it's the best thing that ever happened to me. Quite well, Sheena was the best thing. She's not here, right? But it's something that stuck with me. I mean, I've been away from New Cumnock for over 40 years. I've always had strong contacts with it, and this was an important part of my life. So we had the Martyrs Kirk, the parish kirk was cried the Martyrs Kirk, and we had a youth club. And you could go to the youth club, the games, with games in the church hall on the Friday night. But Mr. McPherson, the minister, used to come along and see if you're not at the talk on the Sunday night, there are no games next week. So you're like that. So you're already at the Sunday school in the morning, and then they're dragging you to listen to somebody about how they knitted a poncho in Kathmandu. Right? But fortunately, Donald McIver came along. He was the president of the New Cumnock Local Natural History Club. And absolutely just wonderful man, great knowledge of the place. And it wasn't until later I realised that I knew he was my stepdad's cousin. But we joined it in 1974, and there was already 3 activity groups. So there was the Castles group, that's Waterhead Castle, that's Wee Regend, and that's the Brig Inverness, and that's Macagoul. And we've got a quote in Canmore. When somebody came later and said, so much of this was ruined and destroyed that we can't make it in our telly. But quite famous. And that was the old kirk at the time with the ivy, quite heavy. And Ian's group, the Improving New Cumnock group, we got some funding and that ivy's off, and it's for a 1659 building, it's superb. And there's, where Cosgaelic, not a tree in sight, There's a moorland for Covenanters. When you go up to it now, it's like an enclosure. And there's Donald. That's the water wheel up Bushell Burn that slapped the Clyde to send it down to Westland to the tile works. Also got a reading list. When we were getting in, we got handed this and a lot of notes from Mrs. Geddes, the librarian. For any young newcomer folk, a library is a place you go to get a book, and you can take it out and then send it back. Yeah, it's groundbreaking. Lots of Dane Love books in there as well. I mean, we'd have needed to build another wing. But there were two books that grabbed me straight away. Traditions of the Covenanters by the Reverend Robert Simpson of Sanka, in a corner of Old Strathclyde by Hugh Lorimer. So this was me getting my imagination about place names, and these stuck with me when I moved on through uni and working in Barhead. I look, oh, that looks like this, and so this absolutely captured my imagination. I've got to say, Dan, you know, I was reading the tradition when I was reading the traditions of the Covenanters, and great, the Crow Start Burn went to that farmhouse and had here. But the thing that really caught my imagination was the glossary Scotch names at the back. You just used to flick through all these. Again, you can't see them there, but Dulhanner, Duljig, Dulricket, and the Legals are all there. Now, I don't know if this was the Reverend Simpson that did this or he had some outside agency, but he just says Dulricket is the field of the King's slaughter. Now, how can you know be captured by that? What King's? Was that Robert the Bruce, or was it when William Wallace was the King of Kyle? Or was it this and that? So that, as a 16-year-old, your head was buzzing with that. And later on, I just starved. It might be completely wrong, and I thought, because they don't give you the derivation. I said, that's probably Gaelic, Dale, Field, Rye, King, Cath, Battle, Die, Rack, Cath, Mill. So that was, and that stuck with me. And so there's Dulricket there, then the Nith and Duljig. And so in there somewhere a king was slaughtered. But maybe no. And that's the mill at the brig. And I was lucky to get some photos for Linda Sutherland when it was actually operating. But I remember going to Dulricket Mill with the History Club as well, and then on to Duljig. Later years now, these are my photos at the bottom, what's happened, and now to now it's abandoned entirely. And that's what the head of the Niths happened, that you could rename the head of the Nith the abandoned river. It's quite heartbreaking. The challenge is we don't lose their names, because their names are steeped in history. You know, but that's another place, I guess. And here I've nicked a photo for Cumnock Connections. So this is Hugh Lorimer in a corner of Old Strathclyde. What a book! In my age group as well, there was the book that got out the library was Eric von Daniken, A Charity of the Gods. Couldn't lick his boots. You opened this thing and you were away to some other planet, but the planet was in you Cumnock and Cumnock. It's just, it really is. So reading his obituary, his first interest was in the derivation of place names, and this led him to a development of the history associated with the names. And that's actually some of the things I'm talking about in the website and ploughing up the past. That's the motivation. And then as he linked his historical story together over the years, he sought corroboration from the ancient Welsh poets, that's in their work, and indeed he was a frequent visitor to Wales, calling in various university professors in his quest for historical facts and dates. And that's just pure dedication. That is just quite phenomenal. And he said Dulricket, Scottsdale hold a portion in the place named Reged. And there's Reged down in Northumbria. If you go down now, there's a shopping centre called Reged just off the turn off to Penrith. Well, at least it's remembered the name. And here's our wee corner of Strathclyde up there. And what Lorimer was reading, so he's reading this is Professor Watson's Celtic Place Names of Scotland. And his magnificent work Professor Watson gives Dun Raggett in Wigtonshire as the fort of Regan, just up at the Luce Bay, and the lovely moat that's further along there. And he's just jumped to his corner of Strathclyde, Dalricket, New Cumnock. When I mentioned Dalricket, which I concluded was the ancient Reged, it was at once and enthusiastically received without question by the above-mentioned authority. So this is Professor Watson giving his stamp of approval here as a valuable find in the study of this very vexed question. So I'm in a dilemma now. Is that King's Slaughter or is it Reged? Or is it the same thing? But what he then did, as I say, he pored over the maps and the landscapes and he just souped up all the names that had any association at all with the genealogical tables. And he picked these names: Dalricket, he'd already said Dalreget. We've got Bentycowen Hill, and you see the hills in your Cumnock, Enoch Hill, where the Nith almost rises, and Munwell. So he's got the four ancient books of Wales, the genealogical tables, Urien of Reged. And at the same time, this is me learning about Urien. I've never heard of these, but I didn't even know Enoch was a woman, right? So his son Owen ap Urien, the son of Urien, and he'd an unhealthy relationship with his cousin, St. Enoch. She wasn't a saint at that time. And for that, Mungo was born. And so old Dalreged here goes like that. I've already told you about the Regget. Well, I ken what Bentycowen Hill means. It's Bentygowen, the hill of the House of Owen. So that's Bentygowen. He's turned Bentycowen into Bentygowen. Enoch was a doddle, he just kept Enoch. And Munwell, he changed to Mungo's Hill. And that's what you're living with this. And that happens throughout all the names. If you go to Dalricket, Craighouse, and all the marches and all even the rig heads are turned into Reggets and things like that. So it just absolutely amazing stuff to read, and I still take it every now and again. But you have to grow up, you have to move on, and you have to leave the place you love, and you have to do all this and do that. And I guess, one of the things that did happen during that life was the internet came in along, and access to stuff you couldn't have access to before was at your fingertips. And quite usually at the beginning, a lot of money at your fingertips, but some of that's getting relaxed now. So when I was building the new website, because the first year the web company crashed and they couldn't update it, I've just had to save it. Can't change anything on it. So I had a wee revisit of that. And it's a great wee book, the Protocol Book of Gavin Ross. And it spans a period of only 20 years, 1512 to 1532. But that's a great period for us. It's full references to James Dunbar, Cumnock Castle. So, and you come across the other names. So when I look through it, I'm looking for Dalricket. And you find 3 references. So there's Dalricat, so there's no R there, there's no Rickert. But by 1524, there's a Rickart, could be Richard, and there's another Rickart in 1532. But not only that, he also lists the clergy of the people that are allowed to pick the clergy for their parish. So there's just screeds of people's names. And here's a John Rickert in Auchinleck in 1527 and an Andrew Rickert in New Cumnock. So at that time we weren't split. It doesn't tell you any firm or anything like that. So that's old in New Cumnock. So I've taken that to be the personal name, is a surname Rickard or Richard. We know something like Rickerton is often said it's a first name, it's Richard. They're saying it's about Richard Wallace and that relationship, and that's Richard's town. But just looking at that, the Dal at times, what you get a lot of times, there is a first name after Dal. I think Ian mentioned Dilpedder in the way up, so that's the field of Peter. But there's a lot of Dal names associated with saints. I couldn't find a St. Richard, or that's what I put up, but so that was at least moving things on. But there was another reference out with the time scale of that book, and it was 1535, and it was the lands of Lifnorris. Now, the Crawfords of the Legals had moved over to Lifnorris, so that family link was still there. And you can see there the lands we ken today. So Farden, Auchengie, Rickard, that's Dalricket, Strade, Blarine, that's Blarine of Brochloch, the Legals, Whitehill, Shang. I've come across that a wee bit. There are Shang Hills, but I don't know where the firm Shang was. It's also kind of tied up with Little Mark. So there in James Dunbarry, Cumnock was the superior. So that's dated to 1535. But then you go, okay, it is a bigger jump later on. You begin to see the R in Rickard to Rickard disappears. So Isabel Mitchell, that's her will and testament. She appears as at Dalrickout Milne, and Sarah Moody in Dalricket Milne. In 1684, the parishioners of Cumnock Old and New were interrogated about no turning up for church. So it was all the Covenanting times. And Pear wee Sarah was one of the ones that folk cliped on. She didn't go to the church, and she was in Dalricket Milne. So the R for Dalricket's disappeared for then on. Right, I'll now take you to Stelhead Rig. You know, it's not, whatever happened to Stelhead Rig? Well, that keeps between you and yourself. But Stelhead Rig, it's just an example of what you can do with some of the information to try to get to the bottom of this. As I said, that kind of holistic approach. So there's Stelhead Rig there. This is the Knipe, so that's heading down to the Nith Valley, and that's what's left of the houses that were up in what we call Craig Cairnhill. And the Ordnance Survey name book says the ridge of arable land slightly elevated, situated east of High Park. Now, in 1855, that's where High Park was. There was a line quarry in there as well. But High Park now is away up there. It's winter, but it's up the top of the hill. So what could that mean? Well, a place, it's obviously a place name, a settlement called Stelhead, and the rig's been named after it. And the Stell, Scott Stell, is a circular dry staying sheep enclosure. So in your Cumnock, you'll see place names like Stell Now, Midhill Stell, and actually Midhill Stell, the Stell still exists. I don't think it'll be used. And then you have your choices sometimes when you're using head and top. It could be head, top, end. So there it's there. So what do I do? Let's get into the old parish records, and let's see if we can find any baptisms at Stelhead. And you can't, because they're at Steelhead. Either Steelhead or Steelhead. So there's about 8 baptisms in the space of 26 years. Then at the same time, in the same period, in the Caledonian Mercury, there's a public route within the toll booth of Douglas for the sales of the lands of Perwhirter Park and Steelhead. So no Stelhead, Steelhead, which pertained to the deceased Robert Barry, lying within the barony of Afton, parish of New Cumnock, holding few of Colonel Gordon. And there's a lot packed into that. That's what I mean about trying that holistic approach. So we ken the 3 firms were all packed together into a wee group when you're selling them. Barry himself stayed in Perwhirter. The barony of Afton was actually created in 1706 for one of the Earlstons of Kirkcudbright. He'd a good sense to marry a Campbell, the heiress of Cessnock, and the Campbells at Cessnock owned a wheenie land in New Cumnock, but in the parish. So then the Colonel Gordon, the Gordons didn't live in New Cumnock. They decided to go somewhere down, scheme to Stair, and the Stair house and that. So they were a bit kind of hoity-toity, if you like. But Colonel Gordon, and when you talk about Stair House, that's where Robert Burns met Catherine Gordon Stewart, the descendant of this, for the first and only time. And the rest is history, because that's where the name of the Afton manuscripts come from, and the Stair manuscripts come from. So the often name in the manuscripts comes for the barony, and it's the barony name that comes for the water. So you get into the Scottish Dictionary, what's steel? And they say, well, it's a steep bank, especially a spur of a hill ridge. And I didn't, it wasn't a familiar term to me. And I give you an example, because there was another spelling style, Heed and Keir and Dumfriesshire. But you go and look at the map, and it was too busy a map. You couldn't see this physical appearance. But my goodness, you go to Markirk, and that almost matches a perfect example of dictionary definition. There's a cairn table with that rig, and at the end of that rig is the steel, the spur of the hill ridge, and that's 600 feet drop for the iconic cairn table. So that's it. We're looking for something that looks physically like that, but I goes into the Ordnance Survey name book for the steel. And you ken it's a local biddy that's come up with this one. The name is probably derived from the condition of the ground, which is considered to be as hard as steel. You know that good phrase? Isn't that ground steel hard? Isn't that, not even brick? But no, it must be a hard ground. And so I'm convinced that's the steel. So I bring that back to the New Cumnock landscape, and here's the 1, 2, and 3 of the properties that were sold in the route. Perwater, today we ken West Perwater and High Perwater and Perwater Burn and East Perwater out the other way. At Park, today High Park's up here, more or less, and West Park's over there. But there's no steel head here, we've just got the steel head rig. And this is, I don't know how great but this is the lidar I was telling you about. So these are overlays in the landscape. It's not coming out great in that thing, but that's a limestone quarry, for instance. So that's the depth. And there's the rig. But along the rig, you can see linear buildings. So there's a suggestion that there was settlement there at that time on the rig, and it was that settlement that gave the rig the name. So you revisit it now, instead of saying it's a sheep ree on a rig, this is a steep bank. Okay, it's coming from Dolhana Hill now, down to Steelhead, and that's just a corruption. So the name Steelhead is just a corruption of Steelhead. Nothing dramatic, but it is a sort of indication of what you can find out in some of these sources. Now we'll take a quick visit across the other side of Nith to Ruckside, and this was just something that came out in a kind of one of the accounts in the paper. So if you go to Ruckside, Scots rough of ground, difficult to traverse, broken, uneven, covered with tussocky vegetation or the like, and wild. And it's hard to question that. But what you've got, so that's the farmhouse at Ruckside there. But there's a wee obituary as well, and it's the Sloan family. We've got quite a bit of information in the Sloan family at Ruckside. Trooper Sloan and the Cumnock Yeomanry and things like that. Although Mr. Sloan had a somewhat stubborn soil and an elevated situation in a cold and stormy climate, that can't have been your Cumnock he's writing about. Yeah, you could put that in the dictionary. To ken, yet he was a skillful and successful farmer. And then you get other views of Ruckside where you can see the green grass and this and that, but it's so it was just really an example there of the terminology, and sometimes you can get wee snippets in the newspapers. Ruckside was part of is part of the Mansfield estate, right? But that's a very recent name. It used to be Gareve, and Sir James Maxwell, the Provost of Edinburgh, bought over the lands for the coal and the limestone, and he just cried them after his wife Alison Mansfield. So you get things like, oh, Mansfield, it must be a minister's field, and things like, just named it after his wife, and you get rid of all these names that we used to have. Right, we're now going on to a lost name. Now, I get tongue-tied at this. I've got this habit of saying Drumcallender, right? I put an N in, and there's no yin there. Right, so Drumcallender. And this is up at the head of the Nith. And so if you look at the point mark, there's Drumcallender. There's the ridge of Drumcallender. Imagine losing a name like that, the ridge of Drumcallender. And here's where the Nith's rising. And that lane there is actually becomes Beach Lane. So the lane's the stream, the Curly Stream, and it's got called because it goes through the lands of Beach. So Drumcallender, where are we at here? So back to Watson, Celtic place names of Scotland. In Lanarkshire there are 3 calders. There is also a calder of Renfrewshire. And then he mentions us Blowhouse Drumcallender near the head of the Nith. Doesn't give us a county name, but there it is. This widely spread name is a survival of an early British Calito Dubron, hard water. And so that's the pre-Gaelic. This is the Brittonic time, with the Brittonic language before the Strathclyde. And Alan James is one of the guys in the Facebook that helps. And he looked at the first element, and he's happy the first element's Gaelic, Drum. So you see that there's a building block of Brittonic. And then you add on later on, we'll call it Drumcallender because it's in a ridge. And then somebody else comes along and say, I don't ken what Drumcallender means, but we'll shove the Scots Ridge in front of that as well. So basically you've got the ridge of Callida. I might take a wee drink if you don't mind. That's good Bacardi. But we do have an earlier reference to Drumcalder in our lands. And so at Edinburgh in 1427, the king confirmed a certain indenture in which Lord Allen of Kirkert in 1384, so this is further back, pledged his own 10 melt lands and his barony of Dolmelton to Roger of Crawford, Lord of the Legals, £46, 13 shillings and fourpence. Until such time as Allen got the money back, and then he would pay it back at the altar in the Kirk of St. Conville of Cumnock, and one Sunday between the sunrise and so on. So he was in through hard times, Lord Allen Kirkart. He sold it to the guy next door at the Legals, and he got the money back. So what were these 10 mark lands? So these are the ones coming out of that item there in the register, the Great Seal. It's very interesting because only one of the Mert lands is in the parish of Dolmelton. All the rest are in the parish of New Cumnock. Okay. And the obulatum is it's a halfpenny. And they're relating that to, I know it's no right with farthing marks and everything like that, but just showing the scale of that. And these other lands here, we'll jump forward to it in just a wee second. We can recognise some of the names of that. But it really is interesting to say, because a lot of time we say the barony of Cumnock really matches what the parish of Cumnock like. That's a big, huge chunk out of the parish of Cumnock is actually part of the barony of Dolmelton. You know, maybe not as rich as something like that, but that's a chunk. And it stayed with the Kirkarts because 1631 it moved, it just became the 9 Mert land of the Kirkarts of Waterhead now. So they're the one we can maybe see a wee bit more now. So, but unfortunately, Drumcalder just became the 2 Mert land of Over Nether Rig. So we've got rid of all these old Brittonic names. Lethans is no the Lethans, the other way it's Lethans Lethans Hill still exists, but there was a Lethans at the Brig at Knockanlee, but their lands have been absorbed into what's now Cried Meikle Hill. Manight's Manach, the big house in the hill. Dalvey, I think, is what, once Waterhead Castle disappeared, they built a farmhouse to farm the lands of Dalvey, and that farmhouse is now was Waterhead Farm. Blackfarden, we know that's gone now as well, but Knockburney still wears 2 Mert land, and Marshall Mark still wears, but it changed its name. It's a kennels. I mean, it's 700-year-old, probably that name, and we've changed it anyway, but that's up to the owners. And there's what there's based in the blue mark. So you can see there the spread, they properties, and actually Waterhead Castle, there's a lot of time saying, oh, that's a baronial castle. It wasn't the baronial castle, it was the bailey of the barony of Dunmelton. There was another member of the Cathcart family that we got, and when we were, the initial stage used to be in Waterhead Fairn, big block like that, with AC/DC, you know the group, right, the Cathcart, and I went down to Donald McIver's house one day in Nistdale Avenue, and it was a wee cottage, and it was right at the end, the view down the Nith, and we're sitting in his Somerset, and he's puffing away. He says, "Have a look under that chair." And I looked under that chair, and it was this huge block with AC and DC for Waterhead Fairn that obviously come out of Waterhead Castle. Where it is now, I couldn't tell you. But we can monitor the change, the absolute disappearance of the name Drumcallida. So it was the two men landed Drumcalder in 1427. They said it was in blue in 1654, but that was probably from points. In fact, it would be for points earlier, date of 1580. And then by the time 1631, it's just been cried, the two men land. And then if we begin to look at the old parish record baptisms, it's stripped down to rig, and then the rig with the double G's, and then at the early census. And then by the time we get to the plate of the Ordnance Survey name book, it's split into two again. One bit cried Rig Hill at the top of the hill, if you like, and another at Four Rig in the front of the rig. Whereas the pair of Ridgy Drumcallida just gets cried Rig Hill. It's all gone. So if anybody's buying a bungalow or anything like that up there, because they're going cheap, cry the Ridgy Drumcallida, eh? So this is a landscape we're talking about. So there's the Nith in the forefront, there's Rig Hill in the back. So Rig Hill, Drumcallida, so that's where the ruins of the Fairn are, at the top of that. Rig Hill drops down to the Nith further down, and there's Four Rig there, and there's the Nith. And it's interesting because you get a real sense when you're talking about these things and think it's Brittonic names and real the age of the place. Then you go a different step, because in the 1930s there were two Bronze Age burial cairns excavated in this vicinity. That in there, 200 years along for Rig Hill Fairn. Rig Hill Fairn, there's a path right across the head of the rig. And there was a Bronze Age burial cairn, and I was lucky to get to the National Museum of Scotland through the back doors with all these cupboards of bits of stain line everywhere like that. And I was allowed to take photos, but not to publish them. And what they said, they'll take photos because they need to make sure their artifacts are shown well. We can't have any amateur just showing them. And so they did that. They set all that up just for my visit, took that photo and sent it to me. That was about probably 20 but I had the right to use it for 5 years. But it's they've never come after me. No. And there's some other wee snaps that probably get a wee bit, when you talk about hard water now, then that's half hard and half water. I mean, that's the River Nith at the head. There's the Rig Hill going down there. That's the remains of Rig Hill up now. So the path went right along there, but the forest is encroaching in that. And then down the rig, so the Four Rig, that's the front rig, which left it here. And then further down the burn, that's the River Nith going down that way, is the end of the rig. So we'll just cry that high rig end. And in a nice day like that, it's just a wonderful spot to be. It's just. And then finally, if you look at the real map in terms of the burns were going horizontal earlier. So this is a Nith rising in Enoch Hill, going up there by Waterhead, and then heading down to head for the Solway. The Bear Lane's at the other end of Drumcallida, or Rig Hill as it is now, and that comes up, that goes by Waterhead, and the both of them meet there. So you have to ask yourself if that water heed of that name there is something like the heed of the water. Was that what the heed of the nith was afore? And where Facebook experts come now and say, look, suggest that the Beach Lane on the left and Calder Water were probably competing headwaters for the River Nith, with the name of the latter absorbed into the Nith, extending it 4 miles further south. So that was probably Calder Water at one day, and that's why you get the name Drumcalder, because it's the ridge at the Calder Water. But that's lost now as well. Now we come on to maybe Ian can help here, but so this is place names Bolt Craig and Bolt Craig Hill. And I've never heard it cried that, right? Never heard it. But here's the Afton Valley, here's Lochside. This is before, not a windmill inside. So that's the Afton Valley. There we're going up there, past Dalhanna, Loch Brown, Black Craig, ever behind the bout. Between Craigbranach, Helmstayamna. But as I say, in all my day, that was always wooded when I was young and we cried at the bout. Now, I don't know if anybody uses the name Bolt Craig or Bolt Craig Hill. Do you use it?
I still use it.
And do you cry at Bout Craig? Right. So in 1642, Jean Campbell, so we've got early names. In 1642, with a lot of local feuds, by the way, and they're a great source of information and names. And it's a lot of women they put out for the fighting. I mean, they're just going out battering folk. Oh. Aye. You're saying that here. Wait till you. Right. So there were a group of 11 folk during a local feud depended upon nearby Craigdarroch, all Bowden, so they were gunnelled up with weapons, swords, rungs, pitchforks and other weapons invasive, but they were eventually caught and put to the horn. But it is a good example of, again, when you're looking about 3 dimensions and to your place name, to have snippets like that, it's important. And then it does appear in Blau Coiler Provincia as well as Bootfoot, the foot in the wrong boot or whatever, but it's too busy up here, eh? There's all tributaries and burns and everything like that. To try and identify the location of that and relate it to a place in a Northern Survey map, it's no chance. But here it is here in terms of, I was telling everybody at that meeting, and never anybody heard it, cried Bolt Craig. I'll need to get that sorted. Right, so Bolt Craig, a cliff extending from the top to the near bottom of the north side of Bolt Craig Hill. So that's that wee run there. And then Bolt Craig Hill here. Steep rocky hill. And then what I would cry the Bout Burn running behind it. And that's it there running down to the Brig and the Afton Road. And then when you go further on, you get an idea, I hadn't realised how much ground the Boutlands covered, because you're now for the Bout Brig all the way almost to Craigdarroch, because that's called the Little Bout Wood. So all that there is Boutlands, if you like, Boatlands. Right, so you go to the dictionary and you have to take a deep in back. The sweeper curve made by a scythe. That's what is made, cried in Orkney. So we're not being kind of thin grand. And then it's saying in the days of the scythe, a falling wind made the cut corn fall away from the scythe and form a neat bout. Corn or hay when cut by the scythe and lying in rows is said to be lying in the bout. So there's the, anybody ever used that phrase at all in these parts of the world? So, no, so I think, so there is a wee curve, there's a curve there, but although there's a curve in the road at the Boutlands, I think the Orkney curve is unlikely to be applicable in this neck of the woods. So into Scotland's place names again, just chart the name Bout, see if we can find Bout anywhere else. I didn't find a place name of way Bout, but I found a reference to Bout in it, and it's very close to home.
Plenty of field, you do about doing and about back up.
You're jumping in? Right. Aye. But that'll come to, but it's certainly not going to do that in Bolt Craig.
No.
Yeah,
Do it once.
you go to Auchinleck, Homehead, Roy Cottages on the south side of the Turnpike Road adjoining Broomfield, the property of William Hodge and Mr. Patterson. And in this phrase here, these houses are vulgarly named about Scotland. Does it ring any bells? Because that's a wee curve, and anybody, right? That's a wee bout. But I don't know if that's the reference, because I don't know what bout. And I've looked, but I can't find anything associated with it. And then we come, when you do look for Bolt, the thing that pops up is Bolt Rig in Balmaclellan and Kirkcudbrightshire. And I don't care if they cry Bout Rig or no, but there it is, the exact thing that Ian was talking about. So in the place names of Galloway Glen's website, in that part of the world, the extent of ground covered as the mower, driller or ploughman moves from one end of a field to the other, sometimes used also to include the return action, hence 2 furrows. So is that's a phrase we use here, Ian? But we can discount that for, you can see the landscape there, that'll be nice arable land and no rocky. Then Michael Ansell, the guy that's doing all this stuff in Carrick, place names, did a wee bit of work for New Cumnock Place for a wee while, and he was very, very kind of him to give me some thoughts. So if you go further up the Afton Road, just at Craig Darragh, no far from Jean Campbell's house at Boutfoot, there's Styamry, right? And this is the greatest rock, and some of us even call Styamry the hill, we call it Styamry. But there's a local legend that the Amry is named after Aymer de Valence, who looked after the English occupying force during the First War of Independence. Remember, he got flustered when he got defeated by Bruce at Loudon Hill. And if you read Barber, Bruce is up in Cumnock Hills with 400 men up in the Black Craig or that area. De Valence had been doing it to Glen Kens. He didn't ken Edward I had died at this time. He was down there, they hadn't been told. And Johnny Lorne came from Aircastle. He was a Scots guy in the English side. So he was coming up the Afton for that side. Amory de Valence and his men were coming for Glen Kent and coming down the other side for the pincer movement. And it created the whole lot of names associated with Bruce. So this is the episode of Bruce getting chased by his own bloodhound. Johnny Lorne brought it with him and said, oh, we'll chase him down. And so that thing about him failing, that's a memory to Amory's failed to catch Bruce. So Craig de Boon, they reckon, is the same name as the de Boon that was the guy that decided, see, Bannock, I'm the first man in the park, and Bruce cleaved his head, right? So that's there. And then when you go into Glenlee and all these other things, so we've got all that kind of analogy. But Michael Ansell looked at that, and I don't know, Amory, Hombre, big cupboard in a farmhouse. It looked like, so this is our Mount Rushmore, right? We don't have a president's head, power of them. We have a big cabinet, right? We have a big, well, that looks like a big kitchen. And there's the cupboard. So I took that on board. I mean, it's fantastic. So Stay's a steep slope anyway, that's all. But I was looking through my photos and I must have, and it wasn't through purpose, because I was actually looking at the witches now here, which scared the life out of me, because I got a flare in my photograph when I went home and I couldn't take my eyes off it. But there was a bit of the rock, no covered in trees, so it was visible. So I used the same Mount Rushmore analogy, right? It's not a cupboard, but that's a big bolt, a big bout, a door bolt, or maybe even the bolt of a crossbow, the wee sturdy things like that. If somebody looked at that just now, that looks like a big bolt. So So the linear rock face was shaped like a boat. The hill and burn were named after it, and so too the now lost settlement of Boutfoot. So if Boutfoot's anywhere, it's probably at the bottom of that bolt. And as I said, she maybe turned into a witch for getting. But I've looked at the maps, right? And so I've looked like I did with the leader. There's nothing that I can't find any shape of a cottage. But remember, we're talking about 1642. So there might be a lot. And actually, when you see the maps, even during their time, the kind of coast of the Afton changes a wee good bit. There's kind of loops disappearing, things like that. So that's Bolt Craig. And I've said still known locally as about, but I'll change that for future reference. But it's always been about to me. Right, the last one you'll be happy to hear. Gateloch Craigs. Where's Gateloch Craigs? The other side. So this is what's called Gateloch Craigs, right? So that's the Knipe. There's the ravine. Gateloch Side Burn runs through it, and then it passes the site of Gateloch Side Cottage. That's the wee lay-by, and so that's the road to Kirkconnell. That's the burn coming down there. There's nothing left of the ruin there at all, and then it goes on to join the Nith. This is a wee while ago because there's all the plantations there, and it's it'll not be too long before you don't see it because there's more wood there. It's like the Deals Dyke and Dalhana Hill. They've planted wood in the front of it. You'll not can see it from the bog road. It'd make you weep. Right, so here's the Ordnance Survey map. So we're heading north, the burn's flowing north. So they're doing it. Number one's Gateloch Craigs, a rocky ravine through which Gateloch Side Burn flows. Gateloch Side Burn, a burn rising in the Knipe Rig and flowing northwards into the River Nith. Gateloch is the name in the estate map. I don't have the estate map. But that name without the affix side is unknown in the vicinity. So the people that went to ask what the name was, they weren't for this. So Hamilton, Pichill, Brennan, Westland, and Mickle and Westland. So I've always been cried Gateloch Side Burn. Always. I'm not changing my mind. It's no Gateloch Burn. And if you go to Gateloch Side, all it says is a small house on the roadside. And that actually served as a turnpike, a toll point in the turnpike years later. But there's a wee baptism in 1713 there. And there's no doubt in my mind, and if it predates that sort of thing, when they built their wee cottage, they knew they were building it beside Gateloch Burn. So that's why it's cried Gateloch Side. And then what's happened through time, somebody's renamed the burn after the house. So and it's interesting because we have big conversations about this huge loch that used to surround lands in New Cumnock and Old Cumnock. And that's the remnants of there. But so that's Loch of the Lows, Creach Loch, and the wee Black Loch further up. So is that the remnant of the Loch, the Great Loch? There's Cumnock Castle at the meeting of the Afton and Nith, and we can hear things as well. Well, it was in the Castle Hill, but was also surrounded by water. There's a bit of defence as well. And we can better than that because we've seen the castle flooded enough few times. But we also know that the Nith Plain floods as well. So was Gateloch Side the extent? So the way to the loch rather than gate, a swinging gate, a way to a loch. Could that be the eastern extent of that loch? Sorry, I keep doing that. And you always get these lovely maps because people then begin to exaggerate the size of the loch, right? So there's Cumnock Castle on the wrong side of it anyway. That's the Nith. Cumnock Castle's in the Cumnock Kirk. We usually don't do that. You just drag behind. And that's Loch and Var Castle. So that we're doing the Ken. Castle's either side of that big loch. But if we actually look down here at the Night Pill again, spelled Chinip. Can you read that burn? So that's Gateclough. And Gateclough's a goat ravine, Scots Gate and Scots Clough. So it's just been a corruption of that. So if you go up the Afton, you'll get Earnclough, the Eagles ravine. And it's a place where goats would be, eh? So Gateclough 1654, Gateloch side by 1713, Gateloch. And you can see it's easily done, turning that, reading that C as an E. Right, so we've just put an E in there in place of that, so it's corrupted. And then the beauty of this, they come to Gateloch Craigs. So you take the name Gateloch, you've got this big ravine, big rocky thing, and you look at the name Gateloch. Right, what bit of that's rocky? What? Is that the no, a gate and loch? Why was that rock? Oh, we'll just shove Craigs at the end of it, and we'll call it Rocky, right? And actually, it's the main feature of the name. And then I went and searched Gatecloughs elsewhere in Northern Survey name books. I couldn't find it, but I found a quote that just makes me happy. So James Hogg, the Ettrick shepherd, kept a diary and wrote it in Blackwood's museum. However, it is either my strength failing, I can't once a wheel through the snow, or I never saw it lie so deep afore. This same day, they further up gain I step up in the Gateclough, I slump it into the neck. If my old wife would be looked up the hill, she would see nae Mary or pear man but the bonnet. I mean, and you know, even when the trees are covering it up, that's what I'm going to think of Gateclough. We'll call it Gateclough anyway. So thanks very much for persevering through all that. Thank you.